just gonna take the way back. There we go. All right. Welcome to the, are we recording and all the rest?
Yes,
All right,
yep,
great.
we're recording.
Welcome to the Ordinance Review Committee, Thursday, October 16th, 2025, 9 a.m. In attendance are myself, Councilor Laraway, Chair DeMerit, and Town Clerk Shirley Crosby. Councilor Kenny Sunny able to join us this morning. First item is to recap the solid waste ordinance issue before public hearing coming up. Is there anything else we need to discuss on this?
The only thing that I would bring attention to for the committee is there was an internal memo that was drafted to outline the significant changes, even though they were minor. It still outlines also since the last time the council met in full. I heard back from Waste Hub Executive Director Mike Carroll, and he had completed his deep dive of the ordinance as it was constructed. And he had suggested a couple of sentence structure changes just to protect the town, because if we were to enter into a contract with a vendor who ended up not fulfilling the means of the contract, and the town needed to backpedal or step back from that contract, he had universal language that is applied in most of these communities' ordinances that protects the town. So he suggested that, and Clint and I both felt that it was a good step for us to add that. So that has been added, and those will all go to council on Monday night.
As amendments to the ordinance, so the ordinance that we have with the materials for today's meeting, the red line version. Is not
correct.
include.
It should include.
It should include, okay.
Yes. And so I would draw attention, as I said, to the internal memo that was drafted, because that does touch on these bulleted points that I just told you. So I think that as far as Monday night goes, we should be at a point that we could either answer questions or field any concern that might rise.
Yeah, and this is not a significant enough change that you feel like it warrants a postponement of the vote. Okay, great.
No, nope.
And you'll be with us either by Zoom or by in person to help
Yes.
answer specific questions.
I will be, and I will say that this solid waste ordinance I'm proud of, because it was a conservative effort of the Public Works Department, my department, Mike Carroll, this committee. I mean, everybody really put their hands on it and dug in. And I think it's going to be good. It's going to be a good template for us to use as a measure stick when we look at the other ordinances
Great.
on our intent.
And Mike is the waste hub, what's the relationship between Orono and waste hub? Mike?
So we are in a like regional, I guess you'd say, group of municipalities that all are supporting the same mission of having an efficient and economical waste stream disposal program. And in years past, when this was first formed, it would have been, you know, a different name. They reorganized when the Fiberite and some of the other facilities when PERC shut down. So this has been a long-standing relationship. I want to say it's been at least 10, if not 15 years that this group has been in existence. I do know that the council has asked Clint to try to schedule a meeting in the near future for Mike Carroll and Bell Ryder to come to a town council meeting to give you more context to what this committee does, what is their purpose and mission. So I would expect that they are going to do a much more graceful job of explaining what their charge is than I do.
Okay.
Yep.
Seems like they're all ducks in a row here, and yeah, just reviewing these changes again. common sense, makes a lot of sense. Thank you very much.
Yep.
Item 3 is schedule / memo.
Mhm.
So this is, I think, more to talk about, I assume, our wider schedule of review.
Yes, and I wanted to just go over some housekeeping things and get some clarity on where the committee would like me to be when I am prepping for the committee. So this morning, an email went out just prior to the meeting to give to the full council the updated schedule that was just recently updated following Councilor Mark's comments that she'd like to see the schedule again and would like to know where we were in our charge of what we are working on or what we have ranked for priorities. So Clint and I met and we went over what I believed that the committee had decided for some sort of a timeline. I got the schedule updated and that went out to the full council this morning. I do have copies of that schedule if you don't have it readily accessible. And what I would say about the schedule is always meant to be a living document that we're gonna change as the needs of the council or the community or the staff change. And so, yes, we have a timeline in mind, but that doesn't mean we're not flexible. In the email, I did take liberty, Rob, and I asked counselors that if they have questions, concerns, or comments about how this committee is operating, they should funnel those through you as the chair.
That's fine.
And that was because I felt that if it came through you as the chair, then that you could let us know where you wanted us to go with charges that are brought forward. And then the council can have a broader discussion on that. In regards to the memo, I did write a memo for when we did the ordinance work previously. And then we hit solid waste, and because solid waste had been such an ongoing ordinance that got talked about in many meetings, I did not at the time feel it was necessary that I would need to do a memo, so one was not done. As we know, Councilor Marks asked for a memo because the council finds that helpful as they look, because they're not attending the ordinance committee meetings, they're not as adept as what we are doing, so I wanted to ask this committee, are we in favor that each time that we're gonna go to public hearing or we're going to be bringing someone forward, that I prep just a quick memo to talk about the work that the committee's done? Should we not? I mean, if we feel it has merit and it helps our process, I don't have a problem doing it. I just wanna know that we should be doing it.
Yeah. I like it because it brings the rest of the council and the community up to speed, if they can check in. I like it because it takes some of the pressure. We don't. Hey, I've missed one of these meetings recently, Leo's not here today, we occasionally, when we met, it's a good way for us to check out, to follow along. If we're not able to attend, and this is really, since this is, I think it's a fair characterization, this is very much a staff driven committee that it brings the ideas in, and then remember this committee work with staff to kind of steer it, but I mean, it's staff driven. And I think I think you're a very important resource in that, given that all the coordination work you do.
Yeah.
And memo kind of captures that.
Yeah.
Briefly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's fine by me.
right,
And as long as you feel like it makes sense within your workload.
yep.
Right.
Well, I can tell you from a historic standpoint, 10 years from now, if we have a moment of, why did we ever do this?
Yeah.
The memo is going to be so crucial
Yeah.
to being able to answer, why did we do this?
I'm spending my Thursday mornings with the geezer sneakers rather than as a member of this committee.
Yes.
I won't be there yet, but yeah.
I wonder, so is there, I know you said the schedule is gonna be a living document. I wonder, is there going to be a standard place where people can go to see the document that's ongoing and its changes, where maybe some memos as part of the, the like spring 25 completed,
Yeah.
having like the memo linked there, hyperlinked there or something?
So one, what we could do, and this would take some organization of me probably sitting down with Cody. But what we probably could do within, you have your page that is the town council, and then you have your segue of what is the committee work.
Sure.
Perhaps some of those placeholders could be, one is this living document. And we do give accessibility that people can open the document, they can view it, they can see where we're at. And yes, it is a great suggestion, Rob, that maybe we hyperlink it. And then if it says it was spring of 25 completed, they can literally click on it and see that it's completed. Because what I did learn as of late, and this is a little bit of in the weeds that you might want to know about. We pay for a service to update our ordinances and codify them in the here and now. However, in order for them to keep social media current, and in order for us to be more efficient in time and resource of expense, they only update once a year.
Right.
And that happens in May. So the other day, for example, I went to look something up for a GA client. And when I clicked on our website and I said it's right on our website, and I went to click the GA ordinance, it was still outdated. So then that was like, wait a minute, we made a change. So then I had to go back to the minutes. Then when I circled back and talked to Amanda, Amanda said to me, Shelley, remember the decision had been made. We weren't gonna codify every single time something got changed, because it's like a $3,000 charge.
Yeah.
Every time they go in and they do that codifications process. So as a municipality, the decision was made, we're only doing it on an annual basis. And if that's the case, then what you're suggesting, Rob, makes sense, right? Because we want to steer people to the social media accounts and to the website.
Mhm.
But what we don't want to do is steer them there and they're still reading outdated information.
So then, I like that a lot. How do we also manage that with ordinances that get changed that aren't through this process? So like the disorderly properties changes we made in
Yeah.
August. Did not run through this committee.
Mm-hmm.
So how do we make sure we capture those as well? Because it's important that, we're only gonna do it once a year. It's important we have a spot where we can point people to where they can find the updates. the
Yeah.
ordinances.
I've been meaning to interrupt you if you
That's
want
okay.
to share, but on the website, we have a link directly to the Municode. And I guess I'm wondering if there's somewhere that we can make
Make a note.
a note, one that about the schedule at which ordinances are changed, so that people know like that anything happening since this past May. May not be reflected or is not reflected.
Yep,
Here's, whatever the statement is that makes the most sense, that's clearest.
right.
And I know that's slightly separate from the question we were just asking, which is, how to make sure that we have well organized all of the changes that have taken place that are
Yes.
not currently reflected.
So we're currently on supplement 25 to the code of ordinance, and that was updated August 4th, 2025. So that does not capture the disorderly property work we did coming out of the Good Neighbor Committee.
Yeah.
And does not capture apparently general assistance. And I'm not sure why that wouldn't be, if it was the supplement was published in August 4th, I don't know why it wouldn't capture an ordinance adopted 6/9/25.
Yeah, I can check on that. I think that, so this recently kind of unfolded since like last Thursday. So I think what is a good resolve in the meantime is that I can sit down and have a conversation with Amanda, sit down and have a conversation with Cody. And collectively, we should be able to come up with some sort of a way or a banner or something that's front and center in your face. If you are looking for these specific things, they have not yet been updated. Please refer to this. I mean, people can always go to the town council minutes and they can also go to agendas and find material. But the more that we ask the public to click around,
They're not gonna do it.
the less,
Yeah.
the less engaged they feel and the more frustrated they get, right? And then it doesn't feel like we're always being as user-friendly as we want our services to be.
Yeah.
So, how about we talk as a team and then try to come back for the next month that I possibly can have a resolve that might take care of that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that would probably be of interest to the rest of council too. I know we wanna play it light as far as like putting additional things on our plate.
Right.
Of course, putting it on our plate, it's on your plate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But, you know, this seems like it would be a really helpful thing
Yeah,
in whatever way you all feel like it folds into the regular workflow of when we've changed ordinances. If there's some way to note that,
Yeah,
or on the website, I think that would be an incredible resource.
I think it'd be handy if this is a living document, this spreadsheet's a living document. I think it would also be handy to link it to the council agendas under the
Mhm.
ordinance review
Mhm.
committee update.
Definitely.
Cause I think it would be, if people come to us with, people come to us at public comment or
Mhm.
email us and say, hey, I've got a concern about vehicles for hire.
Mhm.
And if we could channel them to, we hear you and this committee's gonna, how do we feel, I guess, is first is the question about, citizens coming in and participating in these discussions in terms of they have something they think they want to bring to our attention as
Mhm.
part of their staff driven work as well, like
Mhm.
they will be, they're the end user of the ordinances that
Mhm.
we have. So if someone's got a question about, you know, I'm okay with Uber drivers, but I don't want Lyft drivers, you know, when it's something, you know, as always, I'm using an outlandish example.
Yeah.
I think it'd be great to be able to channel them into this work as opposed to taking up.
Mm.
Taking the whole the council's time, taking the council's limited time to deal with that.
Mhm. Well, what you're talking about is kind of a segue into the roads and or traffic and vehicles
Right.
ordinance that we're gonna talk about in a minute.
Yeah.
Because Dan, Merrill and I spent most of yesterday afternoon deep diving into this ordinance to prep it for this meeting and to talk about is the ordinance meeting our need or is it working against us? And so right now we feel like there's some working against us.
Mhm.
And we've got some ways that we wanna look at maybe approaching this.
Yeah.
And that kind of is, you're kind of touching on some of what we discussed, and I'll get into that when we're on that discussion, but we want to create within the ordinance a framework of which the public understands how we organize and do business. And what is the council's role? How can the council help the community? How can the community engage? And so I think having this as that document that is interactive sets the framework for even a resident to say, oh, yeah, the house is on fire and it is important, but I see they're taking it up in spring of 26.
Right.
Maybe it's not that urgent that we put the fire out, because now that I see their chart and I see that this is a bigger issue,
Mhm.
then I have a little more, rather than them just showing up at a meeting and you have to keep saying it over and over again.
Yeah.
It's not on our work plan right now. Well, why?
Yeah, but we do have a work plan, and that's somewhere to put, that's somewhere to put that energy. And
Yeah,
it could be effective if it is, you know, some things are sometimes on fire,
yeah,
but.
exactly.
A lot of things aren't.
As far as the question of the schedule itself and how we envision the cycle of review.
Yeah.
I think one question that Sarah had was, you know, what is our plan for exactly, sort of, is it a 4-year, 5-year thing? I know that is probably a lot tougher to answer because we have things that will continually come up depending on priorities. But
Mhm.
do we have a sense for what we still envision this? I know it says like 2025 to 2030s, we're still seeing a
Mhm.
5-year.
The last time that we had conversation around this idea of a timeline, what I had written in my notes, because I did review my notes, was that realistically, we put a 5-year stamp, but I got the impression from this committee that we really wanted this list completed in 4 years. but we left ourselves the 5-year wiggle room. And I don't know if that's still the opinion that the committee has.
If you think 5 years is the appropriate amount of time,
But
and I don't know, I think maybe the question came up was the charge to the committee to do it every 4 years in the order that we establishing the committee? And if so, do we need to go back and, you know, amend that, just so there's alignment, and that should be a pretty easy, we just throw that on the agenda.
I can tell you that with any good ordinance review committee or any good policy procedures review, the standard is a 3-year cycle, that things are at least being reviewed or looked at on a 3-year cycle. And I think that because the work had gone so long that we had such a gap, like we're getting ready to look at traffic and vehicles, and I have noted the last time people reviewed this was 2011. So when you're looking at that kind of a span, to say that we're gonna be able to get through these in 3 years, I think is really vigorous.
So does it make sense to do 5 years in this first run through, and then ideally set the council up for success, staff for success on a 3-year cycle once we get through everything?
Right,
Yeah.
right, yeah.
that makes sense to me, and so we can report that back to council if we need to. I gotta review our charge again, but amend, if it does say 4-year, amend it to 5-year.
That'll make everybody happy.
And maybe we could even include in the language there with an understanding that. Come 2030, or when this work is sort of completed its first go around, that the hope is to then put us on a quicker 3-year schedule. Great.
Yeah, because literally, if you're just opening up an ordinance to look at it and make sure that there are no grammar, no clerical, that it still is public perceived proper, like you're still conducting your daily operations properly with what the expectation is of the municipality, then it may be as quick as open shop an ordinance and you make 2 changes. That is like silly, you
Get
know?
the gender cleared up, so it's not
Right.
councilman or, you know,
Right.
chairman and, you know, that kind of stuff.
But when you are working on ordinances that are dealing with taxi cabs, that is a problem. I mean, we don't have, you know, we haven't even, so you're talking about a major overhaul.
Well, anything else we should discuss on schedule then?
You are, just since I've raised it, we are checking for grammar, like gender, every time we do one of the chapters, right? So by the time we're done, we're not gonna add. Okay, gender bias will be
Yeah,
expunged from,
yes,
thank you.
okay.
Sounds like we are, as you already teed us up to do, gonna start our review of chapter 34, traffic and vehicles.
So the first thing I'm gonna hand out to everyone is the actual chapter 34 as it exists today, without any changes whatsoever. And then the second thing that I'm gonna hand out is the beginning framework of where Dan and I have started our work. And what we did yesterday was we spent considerable time in the law, considerable time reviewing other municipal ordinances. And then at a minimum, looking at what absolutely had to change, even if it stayed standard. So if we made no change whatsoever to practice or to context, what had to change for those things that you noted, Dan, such as grammar, gender, all of the you know, inconsistencies of how things have changed over the years that weren't kept up with. So I think the best thing for me to do is kind of just walk you through some of our wish list so that you can understand the framework of which Dan and I are coming from.
Okay.
And I'm not sure that we are even hitting on what the council's intent or questions were. But we see this as a good time that if we're already in the ordinance and we're working it and we're approaching this from the council's intent, that we also look at it from procedural intent, right? So what happens daily that needs to be modified? So if we were to look at chapter 34 and we start looking at the changes, and you go through the changes, you are gonna see that they're pretty much grammar intended, okay? But then when we get to pages 7, you are gonna see significant notes, additions. I have put my own commentary in there, and I can speak to some of that commentary on where we're coming from. You will also see that we get to page 8 and 9. Dan and I both feel very strongly that we absolutely need to strike all of the streets that are listed in this ordinance. Strike it and take it right out, because we really feel that it would be better placed to be a SOP, standard operating procedure, or it would be better placed to be an annual renewal list that council has opportunity to view and to talk about, kind of like the schedule of fees. We also talked about the possibility of creating a program, and this is kind of along Orono stops, where we would create a very big campaign. We would have maybe a triangle, a symbol, an emblem, or something that signifies that a road is closed, or that the road has parking restriction. We would brand that, get that signage up and out wherever in town it happens, with a hyperlink that people could use their cell phone when they pull up to the curbing. It would immediately take them to the SOP or to that list of streets in town. And they would be able to GIS or satellite the vehicle and the location that would tell them that they're either in a designated parking spot or they are not.
Cool.
Now, this was a brainstorm that him and I had, because when we went through the list of streets, him and I said, where in the hell is that? What does that mean? And when you have the town clerk and you have the police chief sitting and reviewing a list of streets, and we're scratching our heads to say, where is that? What does that language mean? That's a concern. How is the consumer? How is the college student? How is the visitor out of town for a hockey game gonna know what that means?
Yeah.
And are they gonna go to the ordinance to look it up?
No.
So when we talk about ordinances, council sets policy, council gives the framework. Staff works within the framework to accomplish the end goal. So the thought process is, rather than have our ordinance be so specific that it is telling us the day-to-day mechanics of how to carry out the policy, let's have the ordinance build the framework. Let's have the ordinance give the benchmarks that we have to hit in order to reach a decision with council on, is this road prohibited or not?
Mhm.
And what does that framework look like? What, does it have to be a certain distance, a certain width? Does it have to have less than so many fire hydrants or speed tables? Let's have a list that's concrete, that's outlined, that allows the council to know how to measure. And then we set up a program that is universal, that everybody understands, that is very easily used with cell phones or with media devices. The college can release it on the welcome weekend and when students move into town. And for lack of a better way to explain this, if everybody knows what the bright pink triangle on the sign means,
Mhm.
then everybody knows, ooh, pink triangle means I can't park here. I better walk up and scan it.
Mhm.
And then if I scan it, it's gonna bump me back to where I need to be. And then I'm gonna know, can I park there? Can I not? What are the hours? So we're talking about building kind of an infrastructure, but when we talk about ordinances and we talk about long-term, these are some of the areas that we go. And when I look at other communities and their traffic and their street ordinances, they are not as comprehensive as this.
Yeah.
So I really took you guys down the rabbit hole.
No, doesn't.
But in doing that, like. Dan Merrill and I was talking about if we could have the perfect ordinance, what would it look like?
Might as well do it right.
And that's
Yeah.
where we got to.
And
So,
technologically and like resource wise, that, I mean, this sounds like an amazing tool. It'd be great that, you know, you're at GIS, right, here I am, can I park here?
yeah,
Do we have is that achievable?
I was going to have conversation with Megan Hass, who is our GIS on the ground specialist. But what I can tell you is that if we could model something similar to the trash cans
Mhm.
and where trash cans are and what day is my pickup.
Mhm.
If people in town can go to our website and type in a street address and they can get when trash pickup is and what that looks like, why couldn't they do that with parking? So those are just,
Yeah.
this may be a lead balloon that crashes and burns, but it also could be something great. And it could be very helpful. I mean, because Dan, God love Dan, he said to me, he was reading some of these streets. And it talks about the northwestern easterly side beginning at such and such.
Yeah.
And he goes, I don't know what that means. Let me think about it. And then he had to get his phone out. And then he's like, Shelley, I think I'm gonna have to drive over there.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's bad.
Yeah.
And we were just being honest with each other. So how do we expect the public to understand this?
Yeah.
And this list is going to change as the needs of the town change, right? So anyway. I'm not sure that Dan and I was going down the same street that you all were when you talked about looking at this ordinance, and I don't know what the exact needs of the council have been. But that is the approach we're looking at the ordinance with. So if you have a different charge, then I'd love to hear it, because I can take another look at it.
I mean, I think, you know, it makes sense how you describe working through this and realizing these problems. And I love the idea of this resource that you're talking about developing. And if we can get that, I think that would be a great benefit to everybody in town visiting, people visiting in town. And I think that there's also just a place on the website where people can, especially when winter comes,
Yes,
go to.
yep,
Yeah. Yeah, is that?
Yeah.
Sorry, yeah, I like the idea of having standards that we can point to when people come, like, we're having a discussion now, it's been on. In a couple different council meetings, with residents at the end of Penobscot Street, Penobscot Street, Penobscot
Yeah.
Street. And with concerns about, because there's access to this wonderful outdoor facility at, you know, at the end of their street. And people are coming and parking and creates a nuisance for them. We need to understand kind of what, we need to have a standard of where parking should be prohibited, where it shouldn't. Because a lot of Orono streets dead end into land trusts and things like that. In some places we have off-street parking established for that, and others we don't. So I'd like to have some kind of standard we can explain to people that, yeah, absolutely should be no parking at the end of Penobscot Street because of,
Yes.
or. No, I'm afraid that, you know, we're not, that doesn't meet the standard that we've set, and I'd like to have that kind of, like, be clear to people, a clear set of rules, like you $200 whenever you pass go monopoly, right?
Right.
It's a pretty standard. Let's say, you know, that. We're this is a political organization in politics, but it should be a fairly standard. And easy to assess, this warrants no parking.
Exactly, yeah, and I mean, it certainly, I think, would help channel some of your open forums where it's almost like you get sidebarred on a conversation that wasn't even on the agenda because someone feels so passionate about a particular subject. But if you don't have guidelines or rules to point to or measure, then it's pretty darn hard for you to shut that conversation down.
You live on the side of the road, and we all own the roads.
Yeah.
And the right of ways, and if you live on the side of the road, as much as, you know, I feel the same, why is that, I see a car parked in front of my house, I'm like, why is someone parked there, you know?
Mhm.
But it's-
I mean, one of the questions that, I mean, Dan and I threw out yesterday for like 10 minutes and we brainstormed and battled back and forth was parking on someone's lawn. I mean, we have an ordinance, you can't park on the lawn, but what if somebody has ample room and it's less of a safety hazard to have them park on the lawn versus park on the street? Should there not be some discretion, you know, so those are some of the conversations that we are having about. Let's look at this in maybe a little bit different context on how can we be the most safe.
Okay.
Now, another area that I will point you to that Dan and I is spending time on also is on page 7. And it's section 3490, and it talks about the designation of what they call taxi curbs or taxi. And Dan and I both started laughing because, like Dan said, in his 15 years here, he has very rarely had an issue of taxi cabs. We don't even regulate taxi cabs. I mean, there is no staffing or no medium for us to license them, regulate them, and be able to even set up a taxi cab waiting hub or whatever you want to call it. So I said to Dan, well, then let's be real. What are your bigger issues? What are your concerns? And then we started having conversation around ride shares, public transportation stops, courier services, 3 or 4 Uber drivers, you know, stopping in one location on a hockey night, or parts of Mill Street being blocked off because you have DoorDash picking up food and nobody can get through the street because all the parking spaces are taken. So what Dan and I are doing is we're trying to create language that better suits the need of the municipality, where we're gonna talk about having these designated areas that perhaps are allowable, that people can actually park and they can gather, they can use public transportation, a courier service, and we are also looking at ordinances around the state that are around delivery vessels. And there is proper licensing and certain plates that allow for certain use. That any, like if you are Dennis Paper and you're bringing a month's worth of supplies to Pat's Pizza, there is a certain regulatory permission that's allowed for that, and there's certain licensing for that. We're not looking at Orono doing that, but let's look at what the state says is allowed and what isn't. And then let's look at how we set these spots up, and are we at minimum meeting what would be required, right?
Right.
So that's kind of where we're at with that. So you're gonna see us recommend that we also strike a lot of language that has to do with taxi cabs. And that is replaced by more of a remote service or a vendor industry.
Okay, so how will we get business input in terms of like, it seems to me like Taco Rita, it seems to me. I don't know what the percentage is, but there's a large percentage of their business that's that Uber Eat or whatever it is.
So it seems like we just see it, especially because they're right on the corner.
Yeah,
They are, and I will tell you, I do like Taquerita, and sometimes on Thursday, I will sneak out of the office and go grab myself a taco, and I will sit there just because I'm watching, especially, like I pay it. And I have seen many times delivery drivers pull up and everybody's bottlenecked.
yeah, they park right by the.
Yep,
But it's important to me.
that they can have accessibility, yes,
Nobody's watching,
and
yeah, it's important to me that they get access to that line of business, because that's
Right.
an income stream.
Yeah.
And so I have been talking with Dan, this is not a new conversation,
Yeah.
but him and I have been saying. We've got to sit down and we've got to brainstorm and talk about this.
Yeah.
Because it's only getting busier.
Yeah.
And it's not gonna go away anytime soon because there is such a convenience to it.
Mhm.
So what we wanna do is be able to craft the ordinance that it supports, and we have some partnership, and perhaps, you know, we have the downtown business owners join us and say, hey, we're willing to have this be a designated parking spot.
Yeah.
for this kind of service, and maybe we have that designated as, and it's signed. You know, so we're talking about how can we all come to the table and be proactive to promote, you know, economic growth in the downtown area.
Good.
So
Yeah.
those are some things that we're talking about, and as I said, I'm not sure that Dan and I are hitting on what the council originally intended for this ordinance. But that's the direction we're going without being given a charge.
We didn't approve a charge at the council level on this in any particular way. did we?
No, we didn't, you know, as far as like the council in perpetuity's sort of goal for this ordinance section. And I think, you know, we want it to work for the people of the town of Orono, so I'm. It sounds like you've already been doing some really thoughtful, creative work on how to make this both relevant, to the average person and what we actually need, and, to the needs of the staff as well.
We did have, though, we've had conversations about it as part of the Good Neighbor Committee.
Yeah.
As well, on, you know, when there's a large event and parking becomes, you know, car that draws a lot of cars to a neighborhood and blocks traffic. That's another element of where we wanna have. It's disorderly to block access to a neighborhood for emergency vehicles and residents because you're having an event. That's a disorderly activity.
Yes,
So how do we define that? Can we define it, or is it up to the discretion of the responding officers and things like that? So just, that might be, I pointed out, so we're thinking about that as we do this ordinance as well. I know that Dan will be very well aware of that. 'Cause he's-
Sure. Yeah, I do know at one point, I had passed along some of the research I had done statewide around mass gathering.
Yeah.
Or did the committee ever get anywhere on that? Or
We
no?
looked at mass gathering, but I mean, those were for like festival type events, where you
Okay.
have 500
Yeah.
people dancing some jam bands and whatnot. These were more like, you know, pop-up parties at people's houses that become like nightclub style events.
Yep.
that, You know.
Yeah.
More than 20, the ordinance, the disorderly property ordinance, you know, looks at events with more than 20 people that become disorderly and has this, you know, separate, you know, kind of a higher standard for those events. But again, it's not. 100 people can be at a party, at an event or gathering, and it's not a disorderly activity as long as the roads are, you know, the roads are passable and long as the
Exactly.
noise isn't loud.
Yeah.
So there's no like,
Well,
you can put 100 people together and have a backup, whatever, and as long as everyone's not bothering other people, it's not disorderly.
well, and I point back to, I dropped in conversation that Dan and I had like a brainstorm around parking on the lawn.
Yeah.
And so like if, you know, for lack of a better example, I think about Belle Ryder's house. Belle Ryder's house has a great big huge field down back, right?
Yeah.
I mean, she's got a huge field. And if there was a mechanism to drive and park down on that field and she wanted to have a party with 100 people and they all needed to park and she could, I'm not saying this is logical and I'm just talking
Sure.
hypothetically. But if we had a mechanism under the ordinance that we could allow her, that she could move parking to that back field. And it's her field, let's say hypothetically, then why shouldn't she be able to do that, right?
Pretty reasonable.
Yeah, so I guess that's kind of where I'm at, because I said to Dan, I said, what is the issue with people parking on their lawn? I mean, there are times that we have streets that are bottlenecked, but yet there's plenty of front lawn that somebody could have technically pulled up onto, but they can't because they can't park on the lawn. And so we had a little bit of conversation around that.
Is it targeting, I mean, we weren't on the council when those were put in place, but was it targeting either over, you know, oversubscribing the residency of a
I think so.
house, so you don't have, like, you know, at the end of my street, on
Yeah.
Main Street, there's a rental, and I think it's 5 bedrooms, and they, you know, they'll have, it's got a big paved driveway, and they'll have, there's 5 cars there every night, but that's the capacity of the unit, and if someone has a guest over or whatever, maybe it's 8. But they've got a capacity for it. And I get that, I think that might be, but for like a spot, but sometimes they'll have 20 people over. And they're
Right.
parking on their lawn a little bit or on the street, and you know, they're not being disorderly, and
Yeah,
good on them. Glad they're having fun, glad people get together, so.
yeah. Oh, yeah, so it's just, it's interesting when you shake the tree. So,
Yeah, I may have, like, 4 teenagers in my house and we may need a little grass once in a while, or the once they all have their
Yeah.
own cars and stuff like that.
So I guess my question I have for the committee is, are you comfortable with Dan and I continuing to work as we are, heading in a direction that is right now a little bit, it sounds like we're all over the place, right? Squirrel. But we're doing the squirrel so we can find what really is important that we have to focus on.
Yeah.
And my goal was, November is the election and it's such a difficult month with all of the obligations and the time away, that I was looking at December coming back to this committee and having a framework that we could work with. And having some response back to you on some of these grand ideas that Dan and I have, and are they even doable?
That sounds reasonable to me. And it feels, from my perspective, less, as you described, a squirrel, like you're all over the place. It sounds like you've
Comprehensive.
yeah, you've got it, well, yeah, comprehensive, and really you've been detailed on a few things. One, trying to update stuff around taxi services, and then the other is around parking in general, prohibited parking, and just trying to get that sort of into a manageable place. Whatever means you feel makes sense. I mean, I think the direction you're currently going makes sense to me.
Yep.
And then really the third thing that Dan just raised is perhaps, I don't know, do we feel it's appropriate for us to have some attempt at something to do with the disorderly element?
I think it's already kind of aligned, so I guess I would just ask you to be mindful of there's, blocking streets is disorderly.
Sure,
As I recall the definitions, so.
Yeah.
Just be mindful of that. And then I'm not looking to make things disorderly that aren't.
Yeah.
Right.
In the observed, if
yeah,
I drive by at Cromwell and, there's having a back to school party in the middle of the
Yeah.
afternoon and the whole street's got. That's orderly and that's fun and that's worn out. So. But
Okay.
truly, when there's behaviors that impact other people's ability to enjoy a neighborhood or get access to emergency services, that's disorderly.
Yes, okay, well then, Dan and I will continue our work.
Thank you.
And then I think cemetery ordinance, the only thing I would update you on there is I am continuing to work on the cemetery ordinance. I'm up to 3 pages right now of historic data that is kind of giving the framework of where we're going with that, because part of that is also going to be how we sell and convey cemetery lots. And so the council in December will be hearing from me on that project. That has been.
The whole council or this committee?
The whole council will hear. That is actually more pressing than the fact that the cemetery ordinance needs to be revisited.
Okay.
Okay, so I'll be bringing that forward. And that's been almost a 7-year project to try to get to the point that I can even give the council actual concrete numbers on where we're at with that project. So the goal is that I will have something ready for Clint in December. I planned on having it ready this month, but with the issues downstairs and the election and some other projects taking precedent, I had to shift and pivot, so we pushed it out.
So that makes sense to me.
Yeah.
But on the proposed schedule.
Yep.
This is the stuff that doesn't have, it's a 3 priority. It's still gonna get looked at, we just
Yes.
so far out in the 5-year cycle, we don't have a time yet.
We
So-
haven't given it a time scale.
Okay.
And don't forget, we have an overarching project that will be landing on this table. Once that comp plan once the comp plan kind of has its blessing, right? And it's at that point that we're like.
Yeah.
Then what we need to do is we need to evaluate ordinance work against comp plan against.
Sure.
So when we developed the schedule and we looked at it in the spring, the comp plan everyone felt the comp plan was hyper priority. But we didn't have a timestamp of what the comp plan timeline looked like really. And so we left this schedule more fluid and open so that we could easily move comp in. So depending on how that goes, I can see some of these, Dan, rising up in priority if the comp plan's not ready. And then if the comp plan is ready, then some of these are gonna continue to sit.
Yeah, so much work goes into the comp plan that it makes sense to.
Yeah,
Yeah.
cause we wanted to time it so that they were succinct in how the information was being kind of like
Mhm.
released.
It'll be good too, as part of the council work plan, you know, we're thinking about how do we engage with the comp plan committee. On a regular basis to work that stuff into the council's annual goals. And if this work, this committee will take on a slice of that work.
Yeah,
And then there'll be other things that we do in terms of, economic development opportunities, like that, but we wanna. Intertwine the comp plan, the 10-year comp plan, or how do we schedule, sequence stuff out on an annual basis that
Yeah.
show that we're, and tie it back to the comp plan, so we can show that. We're making progress. on
Mhm.
stuff.
so that's all I have.
All right, well, thank you for, as always, for all of your work, Shelley.
Yeah,
And for being able to explain all of these things to us in such accessible ways. Suppose that brings us to the end of the meeting, so 9:56, we will adjourn the ordinance review committee.